It is often the sole survivor of a tragedy. It holds the answer to why a tragedy occurred and how it can be prevented from happening again.
Nobody really knows what's inside. It's recording so much information that it's that magical black box.
Constructed to survive the most extreme conditions imaginable, nothing can stop it from doing its job.
I think most people are impressed that you can actually build something that would survive that type of catastrophe.
And the sky is definitely not the limit for this lifesaver.
Technology certainly is going to find its way into other modes of transportation.
Reliable, infallible, indestructible. Go inside the black box. Travel by airplane has become so common that it's sometimes taken for granted. With over 5,000 commercial planes airborne at any given moment, it's easy to forget that there are always risks inherent in barreling across the sky in a metal tube at 400 miles per hour, thousands of feet above the Earth. And when accidents do happen, few live to tell the tale.
Our preliminary indication is that we do not see survivors at the scene.
All 64 people aboard the plane are dead, including 2 pilots and 2 flight attendants.
Crews will now begin to dig, search, and sift the ground in hopes of laying to rest this fatal mystery that killed one.
Without survivors to tell their tale, these accidents might never be explained. Relatives would never be able to answer the question, why? And with no answer, few safety improvements could be made. But fortunately, there is always one survivor, riding high in the back of a plane's tail, sitting inside a suit of armor, silently recording every moment of the flight. The black box. Although they are often a focal point of recovery and investigation, these sophisticated boxes work in mysterious ways. Even the origin of their name raises questions.
A lot of people would like to know what they call the black box. In the 50s, most of your electronic equipment installed on airplanes, especially in the cockpit, all had a black wrinkle finish. Now, over time, of course, these things have changed, but for some reason, the voice and flight recorders still retain that title of the black box.
Today, the black box is actually painted bright orange because that makes it easier to find in the wreckage. And there is not one, but 2 types of black boxes on every commercial passenger plane. The Flight Data Recorder, or FDR, records the mechanical behavior of the vehicle. The Cockpit Voice Recorder, or CVR, tapes all conversations that take place inside the cockpit. Although tapes of conversations between the control tower and planes can be played publicly, only those engaged in an official investigation can ever hear these CVR recordings.
The original recording is protected by law, and that was one of those concessions that made it palatable for the crews to have the voice recorder, the big brother looking at them. So that was one of the protections that were built in.
Because of technical information revealed by the black box, safety improvements have been made and accidents have dropped dramatically. You're now more likely to die choking on food than in a plane crash. The black box has been so successful that the technology is now being incorporated into passenger trains, commercial ships, and private automobiles. But the black box will always be linked to the airplanes. This is where they began, and where they are still most widely employed. This association stretches all the way to one of the most famous flights in history. In 1927, Charles Lindbergh, flying a customized Ryan monoplane he named the Spirit of St. Louis, attempted the first solo transatlantic flight in history.
The Spirit of St. Louis was the first aircraft that really had a true flight recorder. It was required on that airplane that they have some way of verifying that he actually flew the route that he said he flew, so they have to have some kind of a rudimentary recorder on it. They had a drum that had a paper tape wound around the drum and a pen that made marks on the drum.
This primitive recorder was activated by an in-flight barometer that was measuring air pressure. During Lindbergh's flight, the fluctuations of the markings on the drum became an historical record of his altitude and time. But the infant commercial aviation industry failed to adopt Lindbergh's device. When planes went down, they went down in mystery.
The wreckage of a huge luxury jetliner marks the scene of the worst single-plane disaster in U.S. history.
But as newsreels of the 40s and 50s captured the aftermath of these mounting plane disasters, the American public began to demand action. In 1956, the Federal Aviation Administration ordered all commercial planes with a capacity of 50 or more passengers to install recording devices.
The first one was a flight recorder. It was not a whole lot different than what Charles Lindbergh had, except instead of paper tape, they actually used metal foil recorder, but it was pens that made scratch marks on metal foil as the foil passed underneath it.
Although early flight recorders were instrumental in solving several crashes, a crucial piece of the puzzle was still missing: the pilot's actions and reactions.
A lot of them went down, and the cause ended up being pilot error because they couldn't find anything wrong with the airplane.
Pilot error was the initial explanation for Pacific Airlines Flight 144. On May 7, 1964, the F-27 passenger plane inexplicably nosedived into a hill outside of Oakland, California, killing all 44 people on board. The flight data recorder showed no mechanical malfunction. The blame immediately shifted to the pilot. Recently widowed, Captain Ernest Clark left behind 3 orphans. Julie Clark was a teenager at the time.
When I heard it was a plane crash, I was absolutely crushed. And there had actually been some conjectures being said about the fact my dad had been mourning the death of my mom. He was trying to raise 3 teenage daughters. And I went ballistic, and I was only 15 years old, and I turned into an adult that day.
Ernest Clark might have forever been blamed for the 44 deaths, except that his plane had an early cockpit voice recorder on board. When the investigators played the tape, it revealed a truth radically at odds with their initial suspicions.
They're hearing this yelling and screaming, and at first they thought the pilot said, "God, I've been shot." Well, then it was determined my dad never said another word after that, that it was the first officer saying, "shot."
Investigators later found a gun at the crash site and identified a passenger who had left a suicide note. The final ruling determined that this passenger burst into the cockpit and shot Ernest Clark, who died instantly. Clark was exonerated and his reputation restored. For Julie Clark, the black box recording allowed her to come to terms with the tragedy. In fact, she has gone on to become a skilled pilot. The Pacific Air crash and other crashes unexplained by the flight data recorder led the FAA to require cockpit voice recorders in all large passenger planes.
And it's just a continuous loop where the 2 ends are spliced together, and it just is constantly recording information and erasing the old information.
Although digital storage has replaced magnetic tapes, cockpit voice recorders still work the same way. They record for a maximum of 2 hours before recycling over again, ensuring that all the events leading up to a crash are always captured. Flight data recorders must monitor at least 11 separate behaviors of the plane, commonly referred to as parameters. These include airspeed, altitude, pitch and roll, as well as the movements of the plane's various steering mechanisms. FDRs are required to store 25 hours of information, and they too contain state-of-the-art electrical recording devices. And one of the leading manufacturers of the black box is L3 Communications, located in Sarasota, Florida. The construction of the black box is performed largely by hand. First, the recording units and the supporting circuit boards are carefully assembled. Next, the circuit boards are placed in a chassis constructed of aluminum or stainless steel. The recording unit itself is housed in a reinforced steel cylinder and placed inside yet another steel compartment. This is the section of the black box designed to survive a crash.
Out of the complete black box assembly, the heart of the recorder is actually the crash survivable memory unit. This is the portion that we expect to survive any kind of incident involving the aircraft. The guts of the crash survivable memory unit is actually a solid-state memory module that is protected by the armor of the steel housing, the insulation protected from fire by the insulation. But this is what we're actually trying to retrieve following any kind of an incident.
Yeah, it looks good.
The FAA requires that the crash unit undergo a series of survivability tests.
The sequence of tests for crash survivability start with the 3400G crash impact test. That is achieved by actually shooting the black box down an air cannon, impacting into a honeycomb target. Next, that module is subjected to a pin penetration test. And then to finish, we take that same unit and then burn it in the high temp fire for 1 hour at 1100 degrees centigrade. After that test is completed, we retrieve the previously stored information and validate the memory contents to make sure that 100% of it was retrieved.
The result, an incredible success rate. Almost every single black box retrieved from a crash site has contained usable data. Once a design completes the testing phase, the black box is ready to be installed in an aircraft. Depending on the plane model, most black boxes are installed in the tail. The reason? A high percentage of planes crash nose first, so the rear section has a better chance of surviving. Sensors are connected to the various mechanical components and instrumental controls on the plane. This information is then wired back to the flight data recorder. The cockpit voice recorder wires run from the unit to the cockpit, where they are connected to 4 microphones that record to 4 separate channels. Microphones worn by the pilot and co-pilot record to channels 2 and 3. Cabin announcements are picked up by a separate microphone that records to channel 1. And an area microphone located in the center of the cockpit ceiling records to channel 4. With black boxes on board, the completed plane is ready to go into service. Hopefully, they will never have to tell their secrets. But after a crash, an elite group of investigators rush to the accident scene. They will do whatever it takes to retrieve the black box and unlock its secrets. Their dedication and translation of raw data into safety guidelines are what prevents similar tragedies from ever happening again. There are few things more horrific than a plane crash. For the families of those lost, there can be little condolence. But new tragedies can be prevented by answering a simple question. How did this happen? The black box often holds the answer, but that explanation is hidden among a sea of raw data. Fortunately, a team of highly trained experts is standing by 24 hours a day to decipher this information concealed within the black box. They are the employees of the National Transportation and Safety Board, and they make saving lives their business.
The main mission of the board is to investigate the accidents, to discover the probable cause of the accidents, and to make recommendations to to prevent future accidents.
Immediately following an airplane accident, word is sent here to the NTSB's Communications Center in Washington, D.C. A team is quickly assembled, consisting of investigators, research and engineering specialists, and public and family affairs personnel. Depending on the location of the crash, the team arrives within hours.
We'll get people on scene and then size up the nature of the crash and determine what kind of information needs to be looked for. A priority will be given to recovering the recorders.
If the accident occurred on land, the search for the black box is usually straightforward and recovery rapid. But if it takes place in water, the search becomes more difficult. Because of this, all black boxes have underwater beacons to increase their chances of being discovered.
The beacon is actually activated strictly by water insertion. Once water crosses the contact points, it will start pinging. That underwater locator beacon, when activated, has to be able to ping for 30 days. This is to allow ships to go out with sonar equipment to detect and locate the pinging sound, and then, of course, locate the recorder.
But recovering the black box is only the first step in an arduous process that is often as frustrating as it can be rewarding. A case in point is U.S. Air Flight 427. On September 8, 1994 at 8 p.m., the plane was making its final approach to Pittsburgh International Airport when it suddenly dropped off the radar screen. Emergency crews scrambled to the scene. They found a smoking crater, but no survivors. By daybreak, the NTSB team had arrived. Within hours, they had found the black box. That was the easy part. No one knew at the time that it would take 4 years to answer one simple question. What happened? Flight 427's investigation followed classic procedures. First, all black boxes are immediately flown back to the NTSB laboratories in Washington, D.C. The flight data recorder is then given to an FDR specialist such as Tom Jackie.
Okay, typically the process is once you remove the tape from the recorder, you put it up on a playback machine and you play the data back through the heads and into a computer. The flight data recorder has a binary signal of ones and zeros recorded on it in a serial stream, and the computer knows to go in and say these certain amount of bits are heading or these certain amount of bits are altitude.
The flight data recorder for U.S. Air Flight 427 was an older model that defined only 11 separate parameters.
This is just showing the altitude here, and the altitude coming down, and this would be the last second before he impacted the ground.
The limited parameters on the flight data recorder did not reveal any mechanical failure that would cause the plane's behavior. The next step is to listen to the cockpit voice recorder. Because of its sensitive nature, the cockpit voice recorder undergoes a strictly regulated procedure for analysis.
Yeah, but they knew that they had been trying to fly the approach before, right?
A cockpit voice recorder group will be convened, and that will consist of representatives from the air carrier, the airplane manufacturer, sometimes the engine manufacturer, and if there is a union representing the pilots, a representative from that union.
I'm going to play it one more time, see if you can understand what he's saying here.
The group then listens to the recording over and over. They will come to a consensus on what is actually heard on the tape and create a transcript.
I think he said no dissent. Was that in the dissent?
After the initial listening and transcription, the CVR is transformed into a graphical representation of sound frequencies that is further examined with special computer software. This serves several purposes. The first is to determine the psychological state of the crew.
Some of the things that we look for is stress, how the person is reacting to the situation, whether he's in control or not in control.
Recent advances in voice analysis have allowed investigators to determine stress by examining voice frequency.
There's your normal conversation, then there's a heightened level of stress, which you actually perform better in that condition. And then you go and transition to a next level, which is almost to the point where you're almost losing it. The voice will change. The fundamental frequency, which is the primary frequency of the voice, will change, and a male voice is normally in the low hundreds of a hertz frequency. Your voice will go up to maybe 200 or 300 hertz.
Unlike cockpit voice recorders, air traffic control tapes are in the public domain. In this Mayday call, recorded by an air traffic control tower before a fatal cargo plane accident, the pilot's voice jumps a full 300 hertz, denoting panic. For U.S. Air Flight 427, the pilot's last words fail to provide an explanation for the accident. There was one last tool at the NTSB's disposal: computer animation.
In this room, we create 3D graphical reconstructions of accident aircraft going through the exact same motions that the black boxes said they did during their accident sequence.
When investigators saw the computer animation of Flight 427, they realized there might have been a problem with the rudder. Located on the vertical tail of the airplane, the rudder controls the plane's turning. The pilot and co-pilot operate the rudder system with two pedals on the floor of the cockpit. Pressing on either the right or left pedal turns the plane in that direction. If the flaps malfunctioned, then the plane could roll and dive. Unfortunately, the FDR on Flight 427 did not record the tail rudder movements. The NTSB investigation ground to a halt. Then they decided to try an approach that had never been attempted before: breathing analysis.
We were interested in whether the crew was straining on the rudder pedals, which would be a lower body exertion using your legs on the rudder pedals. You could hear him breathing, this breathing rate changed dramatically, and we were trying to determine whether it was a lower body exertion or was he pulling with his arms.
I think they lost track of
The NTSB applied standards developed by the Russian military that identify the breathing patterns associated with specific muscle exertions. They concluded that the pilot and co-pilot were using their legs. That led to a thorough testing of the Boeing 737 rudder system. It was discovered that a mechanical jam in the rudder's control system would result in the rudder moving in the opposite direction than that of the pilot's commands.
And as you can see, they're going to start pushing on the rudder pedals as derived from the black box data. And we have a simple color coding here. Blue means no force, yellow means normal force, and red means an extreme amount of force. So what we're seeing is that the commanded pedal is doing the opposite due to a malfunction in the rudder system itself. So that can be very disorientating as a pilot. It's like being in a car and you want to turn right, you turn the steering wheel to the right, but the car goes left. And that causes the roll and the eventual crash of the airplane into terrain.
Because of the NTSB's persistence in discovering the cause of Flight 427's demise, all Boeing 737s were retrofitted with a redundant rudder control system. There has not been a similar accident since. No matter how advanced the technology, human beings are still in command and in control of an aircraft. In many fundamental ways, the ultimate fail-safe system is how a pilot reacts to a crisis. That reaction can literally mean the difference between the smooth resolution to a crisis or a catastrophe.
Canceling the warning.
Here, too, the black box can help. And even when pilot error is not the cause of a crash, the recording of the crew's experiences can still be invaluable. Not only are they used for training purposes, but they also serve as a useful lesson for future pilots who might find themselves in similar circumstances. The cockpit voice recording for Aero Peru Flight 603 is a perfect example. On October 2nd, 1996 at 9 p.m., the Boeing 757 took off from Lima International Airport in Peru. What you are about to see and hear is based solely on the cockpit voice recorder transcription of the tragedy.
Hey, altimeters have stopped. How strange. Turn to the right. Well, go up, go up. Let's go to basic instruments. Tower, Aero Peru 603. Aero Peru 603, tower, go on. We declare an emergency. We have no basic instruments, no altimeters, no speedometers. We declare an emergency.
Unbeknownst to the pilots, a piece of masking tape was placed on the left side static ports during routine cleaning of the plane. Probes inside these ports are what the cockpit instruments rely on to take readings. Prior to takeoff, however, the ground crew forgot to remove the tape. As a result, both the altimeter and speedometer are giving inaccurate measurements. Without these instruments and faced with limited nighttime visibility, the pilot and co-pilot might as well have been flying blindfolded. Air Traffic Control, or ATC, at Lima International attempts to help.
It seems that you're going up level 60 and 22 miles south, heading on 195. We have control problem. We have control problem.
The co-pilot has mistaken the faulty instrument readings for control problems, an opinion he would come to revise. The pilot, however, would refuse to accept that his instruments are telling him lies.
Overspeed. I have overspeed brakes.
The faulty speedometer measures the plane's speed at 454 miles per hour, triggering an alarm that alerts the pilots that they are traveling too fast. But in fact, the plane is moving at 300 miles per hour, a perfectly normal speed at cruising altitude. In response to the alarm, the pilot deploys the air brakes, yet the speedometer shows the plane accelerating, causing the pilot to continue to ride the brakes. This slows the aircraft to the point where its engines are in danger of stalling, which in turn could lead to a fatal dive. Both steering yokes go into stall warning mode. They literally begin to shake, a built-in alert in all commercial aircraft that activates when a plane is about to stall. Now, two entirely opposite alarms are ringing in the crew's ears. A disagreement breaks out between the pilot and co-pilot about what is happening.
We are stalling. We are not stalling. It's fictitious. It's fictitious. No. If we have a shaker, how could that be?
Utter confusion is enveloping the crew. The captain continues to believe the altimeter, which puts the plane at 9,000 feet. In reality, they are drifting perilously close to the Pacific Ocean, triggering a mechanical voice alert.
Caution, terrain. Caution, terrain. We have terrain alarm. We have terrain alarm. Roger. According to monitor, it indicates flight level 100 over the sea, heading a northwest course of 300. Caution, terrain. Caution. We have terrain alarm. We are supposed to be at 10,000 feet. I don't understand. Terrain, terrain. Pull up. Pull up. Pull up. We're over water, aren't we? Are we going down? Are we descending now? We are impacting the water. Pull it up. I have it. I have it. We are going to impact.
The aircraft's left wing hit the water at 300 miles per hour. The plane then rose 200 feet, turned over, and backflopped into the sea. This accident was a tragedy that never should have happened. And the lessons that the black box revealed upon recovery would have a great impact on the way that crews would work, fly, and train together. The crash of Aero Peru Flight 603 was a textbook case of Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Although pilot error was not the cause of this tragic accident, the cockpit voice recording vividly illustrates several key human actions that, if adjusted, might have saved the plane. The first involves the command structure inside the cockpit. Julie Clark, the daughter of murdered pilot Ernest Clark, went on herself to become a captain at Northwest Airlines. She is well acquainted with the crew hierarchy on board a commercial airliner.
The responsibilities of a captain of a commercial airline are immense. I mean, everything rests upon the captain.
Engine failure.
Today, most modern airplanes have two-man crews. The first officer or co-pilot is required to take orders from the captain. But this attitude has sometimes led to disaster. On Aero Peru Flight 603, the co-pilot directly stated to the pilot that the plane was about to stall, but his opinion was rejected. The militaristic command structure has deliberately been softened in recent years to require the captain to listen closely to the co-pilot's concerns.
We really stress the importance that you just always work with your first officer and make it a dual decision. You don't want to be doing things like some of these black boxes have shown, where a first officer is saying, something's not right here, something doesn't look right here, and he's making all these comments, and the captain's saying, oh no, everything's fine, everything's fine. Don't just think the captain, because he's in command, makes all the decisions. The final decision is his, because somebody has to be in command, but it's really a crew concept.
Another major mitigating human factor in airplane disasters is stress. On Aero Peru Flight 603, it is clear from the CVR that a slowly rising level of stress eventually overtook the crew. To help foster stress management, all U.S. commercial pilots must pass a simulator test each year. The situations these simulators recreate are often taken from actual plane crashes as recorded by the black box. The simulator is mounted on hydraulic jacks, which mimic the forces and movement of a real plane. Inside, a computer graphic displays exactly what the plane would be doing in real life.
You go into some very in-depth training environments that hopefully you'll never see on the line.
Engine fire, right?
Maybe you'll have a cabin decompression and you'll be on with the oxygen mask on, trying to communicate with the first officer through the mask. And flight attendants come up and something else has happened.
Losing airspeed.
It's very nerve-wracking, and when you get out of there, you are so glad to walk out of that simulator.
Oxygen mask coming on.
Because of this high level of training, pilots are prepared to handle just about anything. But there are limits. In April of 1994, 3 Federal Express pilots were put through a series of events that no simulator programmer could ever hope to conjure up. A situation where a flight crew was confronted by a suicidal man. If not for the black box recording, this flight crew's bravery might have never been acknowledged, and worse, a criminal might have escaped the consequences of his crime. Although the black box is an invaluable tool for sifting out the root causes of airplane accidents, its effectiveness does not stop there. Mechanical malfunction and human error are only 2 of the potential forces that contribute to disaster. Sometimes, a criminal act can be responsible for bringing down a plane.
We must say
Captain David Sanders, First Officer Jim Tucker, and Flight Engineer Andy Peterson were targets of just such an act. On April 7, 1994, Federal Express Flight 705 was scheduled to make a routine cargo run from the company's hub and headquarters at Memphis International Airport to San Jose, California. Auburn Calloway, a fellow Federal Express pilot, would be riding along. But Calloway turned out to be no ordinary passenger. Calloway's personal and professional life was in shambles, and he had decided to end both of them with one last insane act.
was going to intentionally crash the airplane into the FedEx package sorting hub in Memphis, Tennessee, which is the company's worldwide headquarters, and single-handedly destroy FedEx.
50 minutes before takeoff, Auburn Calloway boarded the plane. It carried a guitar case that held inside 2 sledgehammers, 2 claw hammers, and a spear gun.
Calloway did not want the cause of this crash ever to be known. So what he chose to do was pick these hammers that would cause wounds that were consistent with an airline crash.
Shortly before takeoff, Andy Peterson arrived, thinking nothing out of the ordinary about Calloway's presence. However, he did notice one odd thing. The cockpit voice recorder circuit breaker was turned off. Peterson flipped it back on, assuming that a ground mechanic had simply forgotten to do so earlier. But Auburn Calloway was the only person who had recently been on board the plane. Captain Sanders and First Officer Tucker arrived next. Once the pre-flight check was completed, the plane taxied down runway 27 and took off at 3:12 p.m. What happened next was one of the most terrifying events ever to occur inside the cockpit of an airplane. "15 minutes after Federal Express Flight 705 left Memphis, Auburn Calloway left his jump seat. Using the 21-ounce claw hammer, Calloway instantly fractured Andy Peterson's skull, severing the temporal artery. Without medical intervention, he would bleed to death within an hour. Tucker's skull was also fractured, damaging his left eye and leaving the right side of his body paralyzed. Captain Sanders, although seriously injured, managed to deflect some of the blow's impact. Amazingly, the pilots still did not give up control of the plane. That was when Calloway pulled out the spear gun. But incredibly, Peterson and Sanders managed to fight back. Jim Tucker, flying half-blind and barely conscious, watched helplessly as Calloway threatened to free himself and attack again. So Tucker decided to use the only weapon at his disposal, the airplane itself.
He rolled the airplane virtually upside down to throw the attacker off balance. They all were in sort of a jumbled heap as they floated out of the cockpit and through a narrow passageway and into this wide galley area behind the cockpit.
As Tucker pulled out of the roll, the combatants collapsed onto the galley floor. Far from being subdued, Calloway began to fight back ferociously. Jim Tucker called for help. The exchange was recorded by the Memphis Tower.
Aircraft emergency, go ahead. Express 705. I've been wounded. Lieutenant attempted to take over on board the airplane. Listen. Hey, center. Center, give me a heading to Memphis.
Call for Tucker.
Meanwhile, Peterson and Sanders were losing control of Calloway. They needed help and fast. Amazingly, Tucker engaged the autopilot and came to the aid of his fellow crewmen. For several minutes, no one was flying the plane. Finally, Captain Sanders re-entered the cockpit, took control of the plane, and re-established contact with the control tower. As the flight continued, Flight 705 barreled towards runway 9, but the plane was coming in too fast.
He made a very sharp turn from downwind to base, a type of turn that you wouldn't normally even see in a small airplane. It was almost vertical to the ground. And of course, the first thing I thought is the wings were going to snap off.
Captain Sanders managed to skid the plane to a stop. The emergency chutes were deployed and rescuers crawled up their slippery slopes. They could not believe what they saw.
There's blood everywhere, all over the floor, the ceiling, the cockpit. It was just a mess.
After being rushed to the hospital, the 3 crewmen all underwent emergency surgery. All survived. Auburn Calloway was tried on charges of attempted air piracy. He claimed to be acting in self-defense after an argument broke out in the cockpit. The prosecution turned to the black box for help. David Hirschman was present in court when the cockpit voice recording was played.
The black box was absolutely critical to figuring out exactly what happened. You hear the sounds of these innocent crew members being attacked. And when Calloway came back in the cockpit, he said the only words that the cockpit voice recorders picked up, and what he said was, "This is a real gun, and I'll kill you."
Auburn Calloway was convicted and sentenced to life in prison.
The cockpit voice recorder was absolutely central to Calloway's eventual conviction because there would have been enough doubt in people's minds about what may have sparked this incident.
On May 26, 1994, Captain David Sanders, First Officer Jim Tucker, and Flight Engineer Andy Peterson received the Gold Medal Award for Heroism from the Airline Pilots Association.
David and Andy, I stand before you and tell you that without shame, that I love you, that I admire you, and that I'm so glad to have had you with me.
When I think of this incident, I'm really comforted to know that there are people like David Sanders and Jim Tucker and Andy Peterson out there. They have such reservoirs of courage and the ability to trust each other. You know, while this incident certainly points to the worst in human nature, to me, it brings out the very best in human nature, too.
Although plane accidents receive the lion's share of publicity, they are certainly not the only man-made machines that crash. As recently as 1999, there were as many as 180 significant collisions involving trains in the U.S. Since 1991, most passenger and heavy freight locomotives have been required to carry a recording device.
The basic principle of black boxes used on locomotives is the same as in the other applications, where it will record information about speed, direction, status of equipment that's on board the locomotive.
And black boxes are just now beginning to be mounted aboard ships.
There's been a recent initiative by the International Maritime Organization to actually mandate their fitment on high-speed passenger-carrying ships, ferries, cruise ships. We call it the voyage data recorder for the maritime industry, in that it will record similar types of data that's used on aircraft today.
But the greatest potential beneficial use of black box recorders may be found in the automobile industry. 44,000 people die annually in automobile accidents, an ongoing human tragedy that dwarfs the death toll of airplane crashes. Car manufacturers are beginning to turn to the black box for help.
The new GM cars, as part of the engine control computer, come with a little chip that records basic information when the vehicle is involved in an airbag deployment.